The following program is intended for mature audiences.
TBS, America's #1 independent television network, presents the following sports exclusive.
You're listening to Basically a Sports Show.
Follow us on Twitter at Basically Sports.
Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes.
And check out every episode of the show at basicallysports.tumblr.com.
Now here's your hosts, Zach,
Greg, Mike.
And you're listening to Basically a Sports Show.
We were supposed to talk about this on the show before, real life circumstances kind of put us on hiatus, but as it turns out, I guess is as good a time as any to talk about it. I went to the last Orlando Apollo's home game.
Yeah.
For the Alliance of American Football, and I'm wearing my Apollo's jersey right now.
Sweet.
Which is from Starter. They're the company making it. And,
no,
it's actually really good quality.
Is it?
I've got one Nike jersey since, Nike took over the NFL contract. I've got a Chargers jersey. I got a Phillip Rivers jersey. And the Starter one for the AAF is actually more comfortable to wear.
Wow.
And it's really weird because Starter, obviously, they're not on the same level as a Nike or Adidas, right? So the on-field uniforms are made in the same kind of material that Reebok was using before Nike took over.
Right.
And, somehow these guys are out there playing football with, sleeves and, not space-age material. Somehow, some way, they make it through the game playing football. So.
I don't know how they're doing it, but more power to them, man. It just shows you how tough they are in the AAF.
Yeah,
well, speaking of that league, we before we went on our hiatus, it was opening weekend.
Yeah.
And I got to be honest, I didn't get to watch any last weekend, but the first weekend, I really thought it was a pretty decent product. All things considered, I thought it was pretty darn good, pretty enjoyable. The AAF or whatever it is, yeah.
It's called the AAF. I will say, the announcer's insistence on calling it the Alliance, I kind of cringe at. I don't know why. I can't put my finger on it. It just seems cringy.
It doesn't sound right. Yeah, I don't like it either.
Welcome to the Alliance. Just call it the AAF, guys. Just be welcome to AAF football, and that's all you need to do.
But they're different. They're not just a league.
They're an alliance.
They're not the association.
I was going to say, I feel the same way when people call the NBA, the association. It's just call it, the fucking NBA, man. Come on.
Well, so how was the game itself? How was the quality? Was it pretty good?
Well, I have been to a few Ticats and Argos games. So I guess, that's, the closest thing you can get, in terms of a comparison, because – it's both kind of second-tier football level.
Right.
I would say that the big difference between the AAF quality of play and the CFL quality of play is simply that the CFL play is tighter.
Yeah.
Because simply, these teams have been around longer, right? So, CFL rosters, obviously you have changeover every season, but for the most part, it's the same core of guys on every team, and they've been playing together, and so they gel faster. We're 3 weeks into the AAF season, and these guys had only been, practicing, what was it, a month or so before the season started, so, the play is a bit –
yeah.
So the play is a bit sloppier than the CFL, but it's at the same time, it's not XFL bad. We saw what happened for the XFL in 2001, and it was just fucking unwatchable. I don't think I came out of the first week of AAF football, which is not the one I went to. I went to the week 3 game, but I came out of the first week going, it's a bit sloppy, but all things considered, it seemed fine.
Yeah. Like I said, what I've seen of it so far, I've enjoyed. I again, it's obviously not the NFL, but for a spring football league, and if they stay in their lane and stick to what they're trying to do, I think it's going to be okay.
And don't let Donald Trump force them to play in the fall.
Right. Yeah. Well, fortunately for that league, unfortunately for us, he's busy doing something else right now.
He's preoccupied, right? Well, see, that was the key to making spring football work. Everyone had to wait until Donald Trump was distracted with other things before they could.
We sacrificed our country for a good spring football league.
Yeah, right. Hey, you know what? Sacrifices had to be made. But the thing about it is, like, specifically the game I went to, like, the play was, again, but I would say, like, sloppiness aside, and when I say sloppiness, it's not to say that it was unwatchable. It was just slightly noticeably less tight than a standard CFL game.
Right.
But the quality, like, in terms of, like, the skill of the players, I would say was comparable. And the crowds were comparable. Like, I was really curious about, like, what the crowd atmosphere was going to be like because, again, having been to Argos and Ticats games, I kind of have a sense of what it's like to be in those crowds. Oh, to be fair, I haven't been to Argos games since they moved into BMO. I was only there when they were at the Rogers Center.
Right.
I don't know if that's changed. Opening it up has changed the culture any, but you know, I had a pretty good sense of what it was like to go to Argos games at least, and Ticats as well. But I would say that like it was honestly comparable in that aspect too, which I don't know, kind of impressed me because, like, and this is the big problem that any startup league faces, right? Is that you set up your franchises in these cities, and I'm not even going to talk about like the burnout because there's been a case made that like a lot of people in Orlando are just burnt out on alternative football leagues because so many of them have set up shop there and they've all like failed.
Right.
So I'm not even going to talk about that. I'm just doing like best case scenario. You plop a team down in a market, and it's like you get people excited for the inaugural season, but like at the same time, we're not talking about an NFL team or a college team that has a lot of tradition there. So it kind of gets hard, like, you know, people showing up, not just Orlando, but any of these AAF cities. It's like, oh, you know, if you're in San Antonio, you show up to root for the Commanders, right? But, like, what's the, you know, I mean, honestly, you don't have any connection to this team. They just showed up. And
right.
This is this game. But I was curious to see how people would be. And I was impressed. Like, the stadium was around half full, but it didn't look – like, it looked fairly, you know, like a good crowd, good-sized crowd. And everyone seemed really into it. There were people who were, you know, getting really into every play. Like, okay, on third down, it's like, come on, you got, you know, stuff them up the middle, like that kind of stuff. Like people really getting into it. And a lot of people I saw did what I ended up doing, which is, you know, people would come to their seats and then like in between like the first and the second quarter, they'd show up, but now they'd be wearing a T-shirt or jersey. So
cool.
It seemed like people were getting into it. It was the guy I was with. The Apollos have this thing, right, where their slogan is "Take aim." Their logo is the Greek god Apollo with his bow and arrow, and so after every first down, the PA guy goes, Orlando first down, Apollos take aim. I was driving, and so my friend who I was with got sloshed, and every time Orlando got a first down, he stood up and did like the bow and arrow motion. Take aim.
That's probably what they're trying to get people to do, though.
Yeah.
Like in the same way that it's like, you know, it's a Los Angeles Rams, and then everyone goes, first down,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Well,
you leave that they'll give you the words ahead of time, and then when they build that huge following, they're obviously going to build. The PA guy will just say, you know, Apollos, and then everyone say, "Oh, take aim."
Yeah. I mean, it had a slight minor league feel, which again you kind of get with the CFL as well in terms of like stadium entertainment. Like there were a lot of dance contests on the big screen because you know you don't have to you don't have to pay for like graphics or anything. You could just be like, you know, you find two idiots in the crowd and be like, hey, want to do a dance contest and the winner gets a hat, right? Like it's so there's a lot of that, but I was impressed by it. My takeaway, I've seen all 3 weeks. I've watched games all 3 weeks. And of course I was at the third one live, but my takeaway is the style, like the quality of football is adequate. It's pretty, good for what it is. And I wouldn't mind seeing it stick around. Now the big question is,
did you miss kickoffs?
No, honestly.
I found watching it, I didn't know, it didn't bother me a bit either to not see any kickoffs.
No, I'll tell you what I did miss. Right. Okay. And this is legitimately making me angry because I didn't find out about this till today. But for halftime entertainment, the Apollos brought out like some, basically it was like, it must have been some local act, right? It's like basically like these guys with their dogs and like they do like long range fetch with frisbees. And I was like, I saw that video. Yeah. I was like, I don't want to see this. I was like, I'm going to go get a pretzel. So I went up to go get a pretzel. And as I was getting a pretzel is when they set the record for like the longest catch of a dog catching a frisbee.
Yeah, I saw that too.
80 yards or something. Yeah.
80 yards. Yeah, like when that was happening, I was waiting in line for a pretzel at concessions. So, because I just like I'm just sitting there and they announced like this dog thing. I'm like, I don't need to see this. I'm gonna go get something to eat.
Mike, you missed Alliance history there, man.
I missed history in the making. Like I was in the building though. I can still say that I was in the building.
You were there. Yeah. So,
but it was fun. The big question, though, I think is going to be like, is there enough of an audience for this thing, for like football to start to go around? Because it seems like for a while, at least since the XFL 1.0 like face planted, like people have been saying like the key to a successful alternative football league is 1, have it in the spring, and 2, don't try to compete with the NFL, be a supplement.
Right.
And 3, if possible, get the NFL on board.
Well, they seem to have done that. The NFL they're showing games on the NFL Network, so that's good.
And I've heard interviews where various NFL GMs have said like this league is a good thing, and they're like saying like they're excited about it. So like, I think the party line from the NFL is that this is a good thing, and they're not trying to quash it.
Right.
But the whole thing is like, I think so. So I guess my point is that if this league can't survive, I think the concept in and of itself is untenable. Like if it's gonna work, this is the league that's gonna make it work because the play is acceptable. They seem to be like they seem to have an idea. They seem to have like a really good idea of what they want to be and what they're not, and they seem content to stay in their lane. And that's the big thing. Like, because there's been a lot of people made about like the fact that the Hurricanes owner had to dump like $250,000 into the league to keep it alive or something.
Yeah.
So there's like been that, and then there's been a lot of hay made about low attendance in some cities. Apparently, no one in Salt Lake City gives a shit. But Mormons in football, I don't know what you're expecting there, but
yeah, if it's not BYU, they're not interested.
So like it's one of these. So, like, I don't know if this league's going to survive or not. I honestly don't. But
I think it's got a shot. Again, they just got to keep from, don't overspend. Don't try to be more than what you are. And,
And I would say, like, honestly, like, if they are going to make it to a season 2, don't expand. Like, no. Like,
no.
Keep it. Like,
they want to, though.
If you have to, relocate, like, a team or two, but don't expand. Like, I don't know. Like, it seems like expansion is something you do once you got the foundation settled.
I would say wait 5 years if it lasts 5 years before you even start talking expansion. Really, really make it good and stable.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, then what happens is like say you bring in what would it be 2 more teams next year.
Yeah.
You've already got Salt Lake City in trouble, and then all of a sudden, we're getting a situation like we had in the USFL with Boston, New Orleans, Portland, where they played 3 seasons in 3 different cities. You get the thing with the Philadelphia/Baltimore Stars, that whole thing. You don't want that. And so stability.
like I've heard people talking about like Raleigh and Columbus. Like those are the popular expansion ideas. Like, and I guess like my attitude would be like, let's just say hypothetically that like Salt Lake is like the one city that out of the current initial crop like isn't making it, and then instead of expanding to 2 more, just be like, if we have reliable data to suggest, let's say Columbus will be successful, I don't know if it will be or not, but let's just say hypothetically they have data that says that Columbus would be a success, then just move Salt Lake City to Columbus, don't expand.
Right.
But I don't know. I want to see the league stick around. I don't know if it will or not, but from everything I've seen, I dig it.
Well, I know the ratings were good the first weekend. I haven't followed it since. I've been busy.
I don't know.
But now let's get to the important thing about this league, the uniforms. We've seen them all in action now. And I got to be honest, I'm surprised at the one I like the best is the one I thought I liked the least when the league started, and that would be the San Diego Fleet. I think it has the best uniform of the bunch. Yeah.
I thought it was odd. Was it the Fleet or somebody was playing San Antonio, and they were both wearing colored jerseys?
They do not. They have one uniform. That's it. Like the Apollos will always wear white, no matter where.
The only team that appears to have 2 uniforms is Memphis, because Memphis's traditional jersey, like their standard jersey, is blue. They're traditional. So, speaking of Memphis,
traditional Memphis white.
Speaking of Memphis, a bit side tangent, but Christian Hackenberg sucks, man.
Well, he's sucked everywhere else. I mean,
I was sitting right behind the Memphis Express's sideline during that game, and oh god, those Orlando fans were brutal. Like Hackenberg gets pulled, and you know what? Memphis actually made a game of it once they pulled Hackenberg.
Yeah.
But Hackenberg's standing there on the sideline with his helmet on, and the guy sitting in front of us yells, and we're only a few rows back from the sidelines, he yells, "Tell Christian he doesn't need his helmet anymore!" It's like, oh, that's brutal. But apparently for the first game when Memphis played Birmingham, because Birmingham wears black and Memphis wears navy blue, they realized that wasn't enough of a contrast, so they had Memphis wear like white change uniforms.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's what I heard. They only have one uniform.
Yeah, but most teams only have one uniform. Yeah.
I think in a game like football, I don't know if you want that. Like if you want color on color in football.
I mean, we saw the parallels of color on color, the Jets Bills color rush game.
Yeah, I mean, unless it's like very distinct, I don't.
I don't know why you wouldn't have home and roads. I mean, I think it just makes sense. Just be. I mean, I know
for a league like this, it's cutting down on cost.
Yeah, but I mean, really though, how much is an extra jersey going to cost? You can wear the same pants.
For a league that almost didn't make its first week's payroll,
I guess you got a point there.
Matters a little bit.
Yeah, but the other uniform I kind of liked that I was surprised by was the Atlanta Legends. I think looked pretty cool too. I
liked the Atlanta Legends until I noticed that they had ATL going down the side of the jersey.
Oh, well, okay.
And I was like, Now, I'll tell you what's fun, what's interesting and kind of funny, especially in Orlando's case, is that all of the replica jerseys seem pretty faithful to what's being worn on field in terms of design, save for one factor. And that is, it doesn't appear as if any of the on-field jerseys have sleeve logos. But the jerseys that they sell do. And now here's the thing. Now that honestly doesn't bother me all too much. But what I find hilarious is that the placement of the logos seems to be templated across the league, where on the left side, on the left sleeve of all of the replica jerseys they sell is the team's primary logo. On the right sleeve of all jerseys they sell is the team's alternate logo, which, is a bit interesting. Okay. And it's hilarious in Orlando's case, because the jersey I have, because their primary logo is the O with the Apollo guy in it, with the bow and arrow. Well, the alternate logo on the other sleeve is just the O without Apollo in it. So it just looks like a mistake. But I've talked to some people in California who want Fleet jerseys just because fuck Spanos.
Yeah, I think the Fleet. I like theirs the best. I didn't think I would when they first saw them, but I think they look really good. And how about Birmingham going the Browns route with no logo on their helmet? How about that?
I mean, it's appropriate. You see who their running back is.
Oh, who's the? Oh, God, it's Trent Richardson, isn't it?
It's Trent Richardson, and he's having a good season so far.
Well, good for him. Yeah, good for him.
Yeah, he seems like the perfect guy for minor league football to succeed.
Well, anyway, so.
The big problem is if like the Dilbert principle catches up to him again, and some NFL team thinks that because he had a strong showing in the AAF, they sign him again, and it's just oh, that's why this didn't work the first time. Yeah.
Well, speaking of hockey, guys, while I was in Florida, I got a first-hand look at the new Lightning alternate jersey.
Oh yeah, let's get to that first.
And that thing is every bit as ugly in person as it is in pictures and on TV.
It's really bad, isn't it?
It's horrible. It's just it's so just nothing. I mean, it really. I know I use this all the time, but it looks like something you would buy at Walmart. Like, they don't have the license, so this is what you get. It was just really bad. It looked cheap.
The fade on the numbers is bad. That sleeve gradient is horrific.
Really bad.
It looks like a dot matrix printer. Like
it was not good in any. I mean, I couldn't find a thing about it that I thought was redeeming at all, and especially when it was hanging there with their actual jerseys. That was just so bright and vibrant, and then there was this thing. I was like, why would you do this?
Well, the thing that makes it even worse, too, is, the only time you can tell what this jersey is actually supposed to be doing is when it is on a rack.
Mm-hmm.
In the bits of the game action I saw, you lose any of the details that it's trying to make
it's just guys in plain black uniforms, and I've actually been to a game where these were worn.
Oh, no.
And you cannot tell anyone's numbers.
I bet.
You can't. I've seen them on TV. It's near impossible on TV to tell who's who. When you're at the game, it's slightly better, but not much. And I think the team the team had this really weird statement because they said something like, "Oh, we did TV tests before we finalized the design." Like, did you? Did you really? Because
I don't believe that.
Because nobody I've talked to who's seen these on TV, even people who like them, have admitted that the numbers are a problem. So
yeah, they're not good at all. And like I said, especially when you've got 3 racks at this airport store, and on the left are the blue home jerseys, which look really nice. To the right are those bright white road jerseys, and in the middle is this thing. And it just really highlights just how bad it is when it's whatever you think of the primary uniforms or not. I mean, they're very colorful, if nothing else. Or, not colorful necessarily.
I mean, they look the primary uniforms look great. They ripped off 2 fantastic looks.
Right, exactly. So I mean, whatever you think of them, there's no denying that the colors really pop. And then you see this thing, and you're going, "Whoa, that's bad."
I'll tell you what is really hilarious about this thing is that the Lightning are convinced that this jersey is going to be the cornerstone, and I'm using their words here, of a lifestyle brand.
Okay. I don't buy that for a second, but okay.
And they are pushing it hard in the arena. They're like, Lightning fans, check out, our Lightning team shops to get your lifestyle merchandise in the theme of our new 3rd jersey.
And to be honest, if this was just fashion stuff, if there was a T-shirt that looked like that, if I was a Lightning fan, I'd be like, well, it's a cool T-shirt. Sure, I'll buy that. But to make it a full-blown uniform is a little much.
Yeah,
the other thing that's so weird about it all is that they didn't third jerseys at the latest will come out in November, to sell them before Christmas. They debuted this. They kept it under wraps. They didn't show anybody anything. They just wore it in their game and unveiled it the day of February 7th.
Well, they were leaked earlier, remember?
Right, they were leaked, yeah. But no.
And then the team said, like, these are not accurate, and then it turned out they were accurate.
Right, of course, which is, we all knew that, just because that's how that always works. But
the funny thing is that I was at a game in November, and I actually asked the guy at the main, like the big team store in the arena. Like, I asked, like, new third jerseys, you got any? Like, well, when are they going to go on sale? And he actually said, what third jerseys to me? And I'm like, don't you fucking try that. Like, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
I couldn't tell you about the black third jerseys that we don't have. I didn't say they were black.
Anyway, moving on from the bad Lightning jerseys.
I just want to say one last thing. They like thematically, they look like the original alternate jerseys with like the Thunderstorm jerseys, only with all of the character and charms like stripped out of it. It's like the same broad strokes concept with all of the good stuff taken away.
Yeah,
it's just not good. I mean, I was struck by it. It kind of leapt out at me when I walked into this place. I'm like, wow, that thing's bad. Just bad.
Everything about this, from the fact that they're trying to use this to sell lifestyle merchandise, to the fact that their stupid hashtag is disrupt the night for this uniform. And I'm like, why would you want to disrupt the night? That's a nuisance. Like,
well, but the thing with that too is like, okay, I get it. Lightning bolts disturb the night or whatever.
Yeah.
But this is an entirely black and dark gray jersey.
Yeah.
If anything, it looks exactly like the night. Like, yeah. I don't get it.
I will say this, I saw a lot of people wearing them, though. Like, people were buying them.
They always do.
There's always a lot of idiots.
Yeah, there always do.
I can't wait for someone to buy one of these, put the Cavalier 4 on it, and then put the 2003 Stanley Cup Finals patch on it as well, because why the fuck not? Just...
Yeah.
But anyway, moving on to actual hockey news.
Well, yeah, today was the trade deadline, and based on today's results, are you guys going to be ready for the Nashville-Columbus Stanley Cup Final?
Huh?
No, because
I'm ready.
That's not a thing that's happening.
Oh, but hey, I mean, Nashville, they got Wayne Simmons and Michael Granlund, and the Blue Jackets got Matt Duchene and Ryan Dzingel, and who else did they get today? Where are the Blue Jackets?
Jackets made moves?
Adam McQuaid.
Oh yeah, the Jackets made moves.
Wow.
The Jackets because the controversy all season has been, are they going to trade Artemi Panarin and Sergei Bobrovsky? Are they going to lose them at the end of the year? And I think they determined that it's just not going to be in their best interest to try and trade them right now. And even if they're going to lose them, they're going to lose them. They can't do anything about it. So they said, you know what? Let's just do it. Let's just go all in and see what the hell we can do. Try to win a playoff series or two. And and they traded for Matt Duchene from the Senators. They got Ryan Dzingel from the Senators, who got taken back to Columbus when Duchene had to go back and get his wife and dog and kid, and picked up Ryan Dzingel and went back to Columbus. And then, they traded for Adam McQuaid today. I could have sworn they got somebody else.
Well, so in all seriousness, so how much better does this...
Keith Kincaid as a goalie from the Devils, who, if Sergei Bobrovsky does shit his pants in the playoffs, which he's likely to do because that's just what he does.
Yeah, he doesn't shit his pants so much. It's just like little runs down his leg, kind of. I mean, he's not terrible, but not good either.
Yeah.
He gets a little nervous.
Yeah, but that's not something you want from your starting goalie.
I mean, he's good. Like I said, I wouldn't say that he shits himself and falls apart, but he definitely has some intestinal issues in the playoffs. I'll put it that way.
So right now, Columbus, excuse me, Columbus sits in the third spot there in the Metro. Right, they would open with a series against the Capitals again.
Of course,
they are, but they're only they're only a point out of falling down to the wild card spot or even out of it right now. So this is the way the East looks, around the bubble. You have the Blue Jackets number 3 in the Metro. Montreal is the first wild card at 73 points.
Montreal is not as dumpster fiery as I thought they'd be this year.
Yeah, that's kind of surprising. And Carolina has worked their way back into a playoff spot. They're 72 points. They're also in the Metro, so they could unseat Columbus in theory. And then Pittsburgh also has 72 points, another team in the Metro that could potentially unseat somebody. So the Blue Jackets are saying they're kind of on the bubble. They just need to make a push, and let's just give it a damn shot, see what happens.
I'm surprised. I mean, that just seems like so uncharacteristic of them to actually
exactly
make a run at it.
Well, I mean, that's that's what people are saying, that this is kind of, and given what they gave up for this haul, it's sort of a situation where, is it kind of a win now situation?
Well, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, what did they give up? I mean, how much of their future did they trade away to do this?
You also have to consider that in addition to what they gave up, like Bobrovsky is probably gone next year as well, even if they technically
and Panarin,
yeah. So it's
basically we're going to take a run at it this year, and then we're going to suck again.
Maybe.
I think potentially. I think it's kind of, we're going to take a run at it this year, and if we don't get, I don't even think it's necessarily like, I don't want to belittle their efforts, but I don't think it's so much make a run at it. I think it was so much that I think it's more like, let's win a playoff series. I don't want to say it's that simple, but I think it's more like, we've got to show that we're serious.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where, I mean, you know it, Greg. Like the Blue Jackets at their best have made the playoffs and then sucked.
Right.
And I think it's just a matter of, we have to finally do something. Like, if we as a franchise,
I don't mean like make a run at the cup. I don't know that, I mean, you guys know better than I do, but this doesn't sound like enough for, like, all of a sudden they're serious cup contenders. But what I mean is, we've got to do more than just go out and lose in 6 to Washington.
Yeah,
again. Yeah.
That's exactly what that is. They're trying to at least win a round, and based on the way the Metro is looking, the Islanders are somehow in first place, and that's just a marvelous coaching job there by Barry Trotz.
Maybe Washington the Capitals can be had. Mistake.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think maybe they should have kept them around.
Yeah, the Caps, they won the Cup last year, obviously, but they can be unseated. Pittsburgh isn't, at the height of its powers anymore, and if Carolina is going to be going in there, I mean, that's not exactly a big threat either necessarily. So I think it's the Blue Jackets saying, we can, if we go all in right now, we can at least push to get to the Stanley or to the Eastern Conference Final.
Yeah.
And whether or not they get there, and if they do they get just basted by the Tampa Bay Lightning? Who's to say that the Lightning would even get there first off? Or that
the Lightning might decide to not score for 2 straight games and end up losing in the second round. So who the hell knows?
Yeah, it's hard to think that. Though.
Yeah, but they're kind of a juggernaut right now.
They were also a juggernaut last year,
but they've been juggernauts, but not in a plus 81 goal differential kind of juggernaut. Like they're on pace to put up one of the 10 best offensive seasons of all time.
Yeah,
in NHL history, which is, considering how much scoring was done in the 80s, that's something to be said for how just powerful this Lightning team should be when it's clicking. But yeah, I mean, Columbus is the one that made a lot of moves. In the West, Winnipeg got some depth. Nashville's trying to make a push with their forward group. They got Wayne Simmons and Michael Granlund.
Yeah, I like those moves for them.
Yeah, and their problem is that they needed some forward depth, and they were one of the teams that was supposed to be in on Matt Duchene. And Duchene going to Columbus was definitely a surprise. So most people had him going to Nashville for sure, and I think they still made some good moves in that way. And they're trying to get back to the Cup final. They're trying to solidify themselves. San Jose made a nice move in getting Gustav Nyquist last night. That's a scary team when they're at full blast. And Vegas got the biggest piece of the trade deadline with Mark Stone from Ottawa. who's a really good player, and I think I don't know if it's official, but it was reported that they signed him to an extension too right after the trade. So I think it's an odd spot because there's the way the league is kind of broken down this year. You have in the East, you have the juggernaut Lightning. They are far and away better than everybody else, and that's unfortunately just where it is. You have Boston and Toronto having nice seasons. Then you have the surprise of the Islanders, the mess of the rest of the Metro, with Columbus, with Carolina, with Pittsburgh. And then in the West, you have the teams at the top, your Winnipeg's, Nashville's, Calgary, San Jose's, and then a lot of garbage. The bottom of the West is disgusting.
Yeah.
Like, Vegas is holding on there. I didn't realize that they were as low as they were, but they're at 69 points, third in the Pacific. Dallas is at 67 points, and then this is the wild card picture right now, which is absurd. Dallas is 67, Minnesota is 66. Those are your two in the spots. Colorado 65 points, right there. Arizona's at 63 points. Chicago, who was dead in the water months ago, 61 points. Vancouver 60 points. Edmonton is still relatively in it at 58 points. The Ducks, despite a 12-game losing streak and losing 7 of 8 and losing 18 of 21 and finally firing the damn coach,
we got to talk about that a bit.
Pretty well. They're only 9 points out of a playoff spot. Like the West is a dumpster fire for those final spots. Like, a very bad team is going to make the playoffs in the West, and unfortunately, the way the playoffs work, that team will probably, make it to the Western Conference Final or something like that. But, so the trade deadline was odd because you do have that separation of there's elite teams and then kind of everybody else, and saw some teams kind of at the top of the everybody else trying to make a push, and I think really the only teams that you could consider elite that were trying to make a push there were Nashville and San Jose. Only made the one move, but a good move for the Sharks. But
I think out west, it's got to be either Nashville or Winnipeg, right?
To represent, you mean in the Cup Finals?
Yeah,
Nashville, Winnipeg, and then I think San Jose is. I think San Jose is better than Calgary. Calgary is a one-line mirage, and their goaltending should not allow them to be in the spot that they're at. They are.
Never write off my St. Louis Blues.
The Blues went on a 12-game winning streak, man. Like,
really?
They were another team that was kind of just floating around. They were in that same mess that the rest of those teams in the wild card were. Then they won 12 in a row, and now they're only 5 points behind Nashville for that number 2 spot in the Central. So,
that's all well and good, but we know what's going to happen, so I don't know why they bother.
Well,
I mean, I've already gotten my invitation to the elimination party. Did you get yours, Mike?
Oh yeah, the yearly Why Do We Bother?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm already booked and ready to go. So don't screw this up, St. Louis. No, it's the West is like, the first thing I noticed was like how strange it is after all the years that we've been doing this show to see Chicago down there amongst the the commoners.
Well, they were in last place for a long time, right there with the Kings.
Yeah, they were.
For a while, it looked like Chicago and the Kings were just the bottom had fallen out of both of those teams' runs, and they were going to be at the bottom.
It's been 4 or 5 years.
Everybody else.
When was they went to their last cup in what? It's been a few years though, so it's not like.
Yeah, but they were at least making the playoffs, making a kind of run.
Well, I mean, this happens to everybody eventually.
Oh, sure, yeah. But they even still have Taves and Kane. Like Kane's, if the Blackhawks were better overall, like if the Blackhawks end up making the playoffs, Patrick Kane might be an MVP candidate with how he's playing. But the team also garbage for so much of the season.
Also, I think we also have to keep in mind that like a lot of this is just due to the fact that, as Zach said, the West is garbage. Yeah. Like you don't necessarily have to be really good to do well here. Like
when it comes to all these, like all the teams that are currently in top 3 spots in the divisions in the West, all have plus differentials. everybody else, the 2 wildcard teams and everybody else, all had negative differentials except for Colorado.
Yeah,
and that was built on a lot of early season stuff that they were doing when the McKinnon and Landeskog line was just destroying teams at the beginning of the year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess now is as good a time as any when we're talking about negative goal differentials, because the leader of the clubhouse for that, despite still somehow hanging around, the mighty Anaheim Ducks.
Jesus Christ, dude!
I don't know what I do know what happened, but that's
I mean, a minus. Where did I see it? Minus 52.
Minus 52, and again, when you take into consideration the Tampa is plus 81.
There's like math in there that shows how really far apart that is. I can't do it, but that's bad.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this though, and I'm.
Toronto's got a plus of 43. I mean,
which would in any other year would be one of the best in the league. But
and what's Tampa again? 81.
81.
Yeah,
I'm looking at the goal differential for the West's wild card. Jesus, the West is bad.
Yeah, that's what.
Right now, Minnesota would make it with a negative 11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Dallas is minus 5, which is not. I mean, it's not great, but you don't want.
God damn it, West! What's going on?
Well, it's bad times.
What was I going to say?
Yeah, you were asking something about the Ducks.
Oh, with the Ducks. Well, I mean, I know they had that 12-game losing streak.
They had multiple.
12-game losing streak, 2 different 7-game losing streaks. Yeah.
So I mean, and again, now I don't know what the scores were in those games, but how much of that had to do with this minus 52? Because sometimes you can go off on a. It doesn't take long to rack one of those up if you're playing shitty.
I calculated the numbers at one point. I'm going to try and find it, but a lot of that number came over the final 7-game losing streak.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Their goal differential wasn't good at any point, but that just ballooned it to that kind of cartoonish proportion that they have now.
You guys ruined Gibson.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, you have the flat. I mean, that one game where he wasn't pulled, you flat out traumatized the poor guy.
Oh, that's when the Ducks played to start or right off the All-Star break. The Ducks went,
which was supposed to be the rebound. Like, let's rest up and come out swinging.
Right. The Ducks went to Winnipeg, and they were. The Winnipeg scored 6 goals in the first period against the Ducks. So it was 6-0 after 1. The Ducks had 4 shots in that first period. They could have scored on every single shot they took in that first period.
Still be down 2.
And still be down by 2 goals. Yeah. Here,
That's
not optimal, as they like to say.
That's not what you want to do, really. Too often.
So over that final 7-game stretch,
even Minnesota fans get that.
In that final 7-game stretch, where Randy Carlyle was fired immediately after, the Ducks were outscored 37-8 over that 7-game losing streak.
See, that's a 29-goal differential right there. In 7 games, yeah. So that's what I mean. Look, it's bad any way you shake it, but you try to find some silver lining in there, and maybe that's part of it. But how have they played since he's been fired? Okay.
Well, they won 3 of 1 immediately after he was fired, or 3 of 4, excuse me. Immediately after he was fired, they were 3-1. And then they just lost the last 2 games in Alberta to Calgary and Edmonton, and I think that's why the Ducks made a couple trades themselves. Not huge moves, but they got rid of Brandon Montour to Buffalo, who was a promising defenseman for them, and was supposed to be one of those young guys that stepped up into a leadership role, and he just had kind of a rough season. He's an aggressive offensive dude, and he just got caught kind of going up the ice one too many times. But I mean, going into the weekend, when they had won those 3 in a row, or they were 3-1 in those 4 games, despite coming off of that 7-game losing streak, despite coming off of the 12-game losing streak before that, they were only 3 points out of a playoff spot going into the weekend. And then they lost the both those games back to back, and now that they've fallen back a bit, they're not making the playoffs. And I think there was some fleeting hope all of a sudden of this stupid team might just make themselves into the playoff team after firing Randy Carlisle. But that's not going to happen. So the season was lost months ago. Like if they had fired Carlisle when any other rational team would have,
maybe.
After the first 7-game losing streak?
After the first 7-game losing streak at any point during the 12 losing streak, yeah.
I think that really, going back and remembering you talking about him, I think that any point from the start of the season forward, you could kind of see that this team was not doing much with him. You know?
No,
my point being, it shouldn't have taken a 7-game and then a 12-game and then another 7-game losing streak for them to figure out, like, hey, this guy might need to go.
Yeah, but he's drinking buddies with the GMs. So.
Exactly. Any other team would have fired him 2 or 3 months ago.
I think Cray America said it best. Like now, like any coach whose job on the line can just say, "Hey, like,
yeah,
I haven't fucked up that badly."
Well, and so once they got that deep and they fired him, to kind of illustrate the situation that they put themselves in, rather than hire an actual coach or a promoted assistant, try and rally the troops down the stretch, Bob Murray made himself the interim head coach for the rest of the year to evaluate the leadership and talent.
Does he have any head coach experience?
He has not coached a single game in the National Hockey League before he took over the Ducks.
Well,
he was a player, and he's been an executive in various roles, over his long career. He's been a decently successful general manager. I think he's done a fine job at managing the Ducks personnel and drafting and all that sort of stuff. But his biggest flaw was his friendship and loyalty to Carlisle. Like the Ducks are in the a guy that we're a fan of, all of us at this point, Urinating Tree, put out a video either yesterday or today.
Franchise, yeah.
How to destroy a franchise about the Anaheim Ducks. And his contention in the video is that the Ducks handed out a lot of big extensions to a lot of players all at once. And while that's true, as somebody that's lived through it and not just kind of looked at it from afar, when those contracts were all being handed out, it's stuff they kind of had to do. It's not like there's only a couple contracts that I would wish that they didn't do. Maybe some of those contracts are still a little long, but when you have a good player in your system and he's doing well for you, like you're not just going to let him go. You're going to sign him to an extension because that's what you do. The biggest problem this team had was rehiring Randy Carlisle, and Bruce Boudreau needed to be fired when he was. It's hard to fire a guy that was that successful, but when you keep losing game 7s,
right,
you have to do something. And so they did, and everybody agreed that there needed to be change. Bob Murray's next move, though, was clearly just the wrong move. Like, yeah, sure, they got to the Western Finals the next year, but that was fool's gold in so many different ways with how bad the Pacific Division was and all that sort of stuff at the time. So basically, to wrap the whole thing without rambling on too long, as we do with these things, Randy Carlisle finally got fired. It was months too late. Now Bob Murray is kind of get his hands dirty in the ditches to figure out what's wrong and fix it. And I don't know. You just gotta hope he does. I have no emotion towards the rest of the season. If they win, they win. They lose, they lose. And who the hell cares, really?
You've always got the Rams, right?
Yeah.
So. Well, yeah, it was. What was this? Okay, while we're talking about the Ducks a minute, what was this bullshit about somebody wanting to change the names? I saw.
Brian Burke.
Brian Burke came out in an interview. Somebody was asking him about. I forget how it even came up, but he was the general manager of the Ducks when they were doing the changeover. He came in 2 years before they changed the name, and he, for some reason, wanted to offer Mike Babcock a 1-year contract to prove himself. So Mike Babcock went away
and left.
Went to the Detroit Red Wings, won a couple Stanley Cups, went to he turned out to be a pretty damn good coach, but
turned around the Maple Leafs. Yeah.
Seems like a pretty decent coach. What do I know? I'm not Brian Burke. So that's when he hired Randy Carlisle and the rest.
Cut players from the U.S. national team because of dreams.
Yeah, I was going to say this guy
doesn't know how to properly tie a necktie. But he was instrumental in at the time when the Ducks got new owners. They were already kind of saying like, "Hey, what do you think about our plans to change the name? We want to get rid of the Mighty, just be the Ducks." And Burke was all about that. I remember he had a quote at one point that he didn't want to do with any of that Disney crap, quote unquote. So his idea was like he wanted to go even further. He didn't like the name Ducks. He thought the Ducks uniforms the Mighty Ducks uniforms were all terrible. He just was shitting on every possible thing he could in this interview, and basically said that we all knew that the Ducks went the black and gold because it's the Army colors, and Brian Burke is all about that sort of.
Well, apparently, like we had people on the forums who were really in the know about this redesign. And, like, multiple people were saying, like, we've seen the prototypes, we've seen the finalized logos. Like, the colors are going to be forest green, gold, and orange. Like, that's going to be the color scheme. And, like, all of those people were like, what the fuck, when the final unveilings happened and it was black instead of green.
Yeah.
That would have been a good color combination, I think.
Yeah, and it sounded like it was going to be. But Brian Burke, what it sounds like is Brian Burke got a little concession because he wanted to go all in on the whole military thing with the colors, and then he also wanted to change the name completely because of the military tradition in and around Anaheim, which it's not a thing. We have Camp Pendleton to the south, which San Diego claims more than we do, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, when I think of Pendleton, I think of San Diego. I don't think of Anaheim or any
county.
So what names did Brian Burke want to change?
That's what I want to hear, yeah.
Well, Brian Burke wanted to change the Ducks to the Patriots.
Oh, God.
Or the Warriors.
Oh, God.
Or the Minutemen.
When I think of Colonial Minutemen, I think of Southern California.
Me too, immediately. My mind goes straight there, right? Minutemen on surfboards. Come on.
Right.
Yeah,
like,
you think of the city with Disneyland in it and the Angels.
When I think of the Revolutionary War, right, I think of Southern California. Like, perfect sense.
Look, these Minutemen, they're a little different. They're on surfboards. They wear Hawaiian shirts to go with their muskets. And, come on.
Could you imagine a black and gold team called the Patriots also?
No, that would look stupid.
Warriors is as generic can get. There are teams called the Warriors, but they were also called that 80 years ago.
Yeah, like the Golden State Warriors. They were the Philadelphia Warriors.
Right, that goes all the way back to Philly,
20s,
in the 50s, I think, or 40s. Yeah, that's just but like you're right, Zach. It works for the Golden State Warriors because they've always been that. But a new team coming out and calling themselves the Warriors, it's like, why not just go with the Tigers or the Bears or something?
Eagles.
Yeah, come on.
Wildcats.
Yeah.
And Minutemen, dear God. Minutemen would only work in New England.
Yeah, you can't. That's what I mean.
You call a team the Boston Minutemen or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the Anaheim Minutemen, that ain't cutting it. That's not working.
You want to know what I thought of when I first, heard that? Like, when I first read through this transcript and I thought of, Anaheim Minutemen, the first thing that popped into my head was Minute Maid orange juice, because Orange County, Minute Maid. There's, a roundabout way you could make an orange juice-related, identity out of Minutemen.
Yeah.
I don't know. I see, again, it's when was this all taking place? When did he want to do this?
Well, the Ducks changed in 2006.
Okay.
So was it 2007?
It was.
Well, anyway,
it was 06-07 season.
Because these days, I think even now, a name like the Ducks never gets past the drawing board. You're never going to call your team that.
No, but
it's a great name, and because you don't have to be tough and rough and all that other bullshit that everybody's trying to make, especially the Big Four leagues. It's like, there's no fun anymore. And I'm glad that the Minutemen, for fuck's sake, really?
Oh, but all of that, too, it's part of the history of the team. The owners realize that, too. And they're like, we're not going to do that. They gave him the color scheme that he wanted, but which
seems
like a late change. Like, it seems like it was a late change,
What was the original one going to be? Forest green and what?
Forest green. Basically, the colors they have now, the gold and the orange, but instead of black, it'd be a dark forest green.
I think that would look pretty sharp.
Yeah, it
apparently that was going to be it. That was going to it was apparently set in stone, and then Brian Burke got a concession and got to change it to black because of West Point.
Brian Burke must be stopped. I mean, at some point. You know?
And I just want to ask, between Brian Burke, that knobhead who owns the Knights, and legitimate businessman Vinny Viola, if the Panthers, what is it with NHL executives and they're hard on for West Point? I don't get it.
I don't know.
It's the ranks, and it makes sense with the hockey culture, right, Mike? Where it's
not does it?
You don't call attention to yourself. Kind of work as a team. Fight for each other.
Yeah, but you got to really.
I get that. But that's got to be an American thing, because we have that same hell. We probably invented that hockey culture in Canada to our detriment, probably. But we never referenced the Royal Military College in Kingston or anything. It was just
and not only that,
play hockey.
It's a combination of hockey culture with American patriotism. That's what
but I think too,
that
though.
Makes sense.
But even with all that, I still think that most people know they know West Point, they know Army and all that, but I don't know that they're that familiar with the whatever you want to call it, with the attitude or whatever, the culture. I don't know that they're that familiar. I don't think that they would make the connection, is what I'm trying to say. If you with the colors and all that and the West Point connection, most people are going to look at that and think teamwork and blah blah blah. They're just going to go, "Oh, you look like the Army Black Knights" or whatever,
I mean, the Ducks were at least subtle about it in that they kept their name more or less, as opposed to the Golden Knights, who just flat out stole as much of Army's look as they could legally get away with.
Speaking of sucking the fun out of hockey, let's circle back to the Eastern Conference real quick for the Carolina Hurricanes. Greg, are you familiar with the storm surge?
The real one, sure.
Well, in the case of the Carolina Hurricanes, this is the Hurricanes this season, because they generally just aren't good and they can get away with this. They took to having a unique post-game celebration. They would get to center ice, and do you remember the thing with Iceland from the World Cup, in the soccer, where they did the claps and the Viking chant sort of thing?
Yeah.
Well, the Hurricanes started doing that, and they would get the crowd into it. After every win, they would do this thing and do that. And then they'd all skate to one end of the ice and jump into the boards.
It's almost like it made sense with Iceland, because Iceland was settled by Vikings, and that's their history. And with the Hurricanes, it's just stupid.
Well, and Iceland was the villains of Mighty Ducks, too.
I mean, yes, that is true.
Yeah. They were paying tribute to the great Gunnar Stahl. But then that celebration is now.
I want a kid named Gunner. I'm sorry.
The celebration then started to get out of control, where it went from that to guys lining up to hit a baseball or play limbo or do this whole bunch of stuff. So basically the Hurricanes have these coordinated, exuberant team celebrations after every win. Now, as we just talked about with Canadian hockey culture, what do you think won't go over well with old curmudgeon-y Canadian hockey fans?
I'm going to guess a choreographed celebration, probably not the biggest favorite amongst that group.
No, I can confirm that.
Yeah, so leading Canadian grumpy old man Don Cherry.
Leading Canadian. I'm sorry.
I mean, that's what it says on his graphic, right? When he comes on
leading Canadian. No joke, by the way. I just want to say this. My dad has, at least being 75% serious, suggested that Don Cherry should run for prime minister.
Wow.
So just to give you an idea of how old Canadian, Don Cherry is really the unfiltered id of old Canadians.
Yeah, here, my internet's going really slow on my computer. I'm pulling up. He had a rant on Coach's Corner a week ago,
right?
Where he's actually been, him and Brian Burke all season have been kind of taking down these celebrations, calling them stupid and whatever. But on Coach's Corner last week, let's see, do we have a full transcript on here? Well, another thing, the Hurricanes also played a game of Duck, Duck, Goose after a win. They did bowling where they all lined up. Somebody rolled their helmet and they all knocked themselves over like bowling pins.
Shit, that's pretty funny, I think.
So here's the transcript from Don Cherry, and this is going to be my best Don Cherry impression. Okay, here we go. These guys, to me, they're jerks. This is, to me, and I'll tell you one thing, they better not do this in the playoffs. But I understand that Brendan Moore is a straight shooter. He always was. This is a joke. The rest of these guys, young men, expressing themselves for the joy of winning. This is professional hockey. What are these guys, jerks or something? So the Don Cherry called.
I just want to point out too. I'm looking at the video of this. This is what cracks me up about this guy. Okay, while making those statements, he's wearing a jacket that looks like it's like I don't get him. You know.
In that rant, he also called. He's like, "Could you imagine Justin Williams doing this stuff?" Well, yeah, Don, because here's the thing. Justin Williams is the organizer of these things for the Hurricanes and participates. You dullard. So the Hurricanes ran with it, made some T-shirts that said "bunch of jerks" on it.
Bunch of jerks, yeah.
Basically, it's I don't know. It's this weird thing where like it comes to this cross section of hockey where you have a team that people don't care about, that represents all the worst things about the Sun Belt expansions that people want to hate, but then they're also doing a fun thing. But then you also have Don Cherry being old Canadian man, and all these different fabrics of hockey culture are being pulled in several different directions.
And everyone's mad at each other and yelling at each other.
Well, I gotta say, I just watched the bowling celebration. I thought that was pretty freaking cool. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna. My take on it is such, and to kind of just explain to American listeners who might not understand why Don Cherry is what he is. Don Cherry. It's a generational thing. Like I said, my dad, at least somewhat seriously, indicated he would vote for Don Cherry to be Prime Minister of Canada. Okay, so like the older generation of Canadians, Zach is 100% right. Don Cherry is leading grumpy old Canadian man. He is pretty much that. There are a lot of older people who basically are like, yeah, that Don Cherry, he's a straight shooter and he tells it like it is. And then you have people in my generation and younger who are like, Don Cherry is the crazy old man in between the first two periods on Hockey Night in Canada who we watch because he's like hilarious and rambles. Like, so that's kind of where Don Cherry is in the cultural zeitgeist of Canada. Although I will say almost all Canadians were united when he and Ron MacLean were taking off hosting duties for Hockey Night in Canada, because really, George Strophanopoulos, like, what the fuck was that? That was stupid. But anyway, so my take on it is I pulled up the attendance standings. Carolina is 28 out of 31 in terms of overall attendance. So my attitude is Don Cherry being an old curmudgeon made the Hurricanes more relevant than they have ever been this season.
Probably, yeah.
And that's kind of where I'm at, because, like, I don't know, like, Zach also hit it right on the head, where, like, the Hurricanes represent the very worst of what I hate about the Sun Belt expansion. Like, every bad thing that you could, like you take, like, the only team that's more of a clusterfuck is, like, the Coyotes, right?
Yeah.
But, like,
the Coyotes and Panthers.
The Coyotes
Coyotes, Panthers, Hurricanes are this triumvirate of things that need to be fixed. But
yeah, like, it's like we can all agree that, like, all right, Tampa, Nashville, Dallas, like, great idea, and the Ducks and Kings and the Sharks, like, all right, that's all good. Yeah. But can we take care of this other stuff that didn't work. But so like I really hate the Hurricanes, man. Like, I'm sorry, like, it's so
there it is.
I just really hate the Hurricanes, and I don't know. Don Cherry is a grumpy, crazy old man who wears stupid suits and he rambles, and that's his appeal. I don't know. It's like,
yeah, I get you. I get it, Mike. It's like I said. It's kind of this. People like to see fun things in hockey, but those same people also hate that it's the Hurricanes that are doing it. So it's kind of like, I don't know how to feel about it either, because it's kind of silly.
I think that here's what I think.
Okay, sorry.
Once in a while, okay. You know, I'm not so sure that doing it after every win is cool. That makes sense. Like, it kind of loses its coolness because you're doing it. I mean, obviously they're not winning every night, but
no.
But once in a while, you know, it's a cool thing when you're just doing it. Like when you're like running out of ideas, that means you're doing it too much.
The whole thing that I come at it with is, I'm going to be 100% honest here. I had no idea this was happening until Don Cherry talked about it.
Right. Yeah.
It's the freaking Carolina Hurricanes. Nobody watches them in person or on TV.
I knew it was happening earlier in the year because I saw when the claps started.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like, okay, they're doing that. They would do the clap and jump into the boards. That's one thing where they're just clapping and jumping into the boards. I think the part where it goes a little overboard for me is now that they have all these choreographed celebrations and stuff where it's like, you know that they have to be talking about this beforehand and like getting new ideas.
You got to plan it ahead of time. Yeah.
It's one, like, to me it was one thing when it was just a clap and a spontaneous, we're all going to skate and jump into the boards, we're going to be part of the fans.
And I think that if you want to do that every night, that's okay, that's fine. Yeah. To me,
I think it's taking a step over. I'm not against the whole thing. I think you're getting to a point where it's kind of playing into your point too, Mike, where this stuff is now like, yeah, okay, great, you won, but what's your celebration? Like, people are more interested in what your celebration is going to be than what you're actually celebrating.
That's why I say you limit it, because if you do it every night, first off, you run out of ideas. It's clearly, as you said, Zach, now we know they're before the game, if we win, what are we doing tonight? You know, it's just, you know, doing the clap and jumping into the boards every night, that's fine. That seems like it's maybe not entirely spontaneous, but it's legit. You know, but like bowling, which I thought was funny, but, you know, when you're doing it every night or after every win, it's just too much. It takes away the fun out of it. It just becomes more of a thing than it needs to be, is what I think.
I'm in this position where I'm just trying to, I don't know. It's I guess the thing that I keep coming back to is, like, again, I didn't even know about this until Don Cherry pointed it out, and it's one of these cases where, like, you're the Carolina Hurricanes, you kind of suck, you're barely hanging on to a playoff spot, and it's like, this is what you wanted. It's like, all right, this is what you want to do, but, like, it's kind of, I don't even say try-hardish. It's just this really weird dynamic where it's like, you guys are doing this in front of one of the lowest drawing houses in the league, and nobody cares. And it's
I think the attendance is starting to go up a little bit. I don't know, and it's clearly not just because of this, but it's getting the fans energized there a little bit. But I think the thing that's probably more important to all this is that, yeah, it's getting the fans energized, but you know what also get the fans energized? Making the damn playoffs. The Hurricanes haven't made the playoffs in over 10 years now.
Yeah, win some games. You know, play good hockey. That always works. Winning always works. I've never seen winning fail in any market. Never seen it. Maybe Atlanta.
This is something to get people talking about the Hurricanes, which is something people don't normally do unless it's in a derogatory sense. I don't know. I'm fine with showing the exuberance, but I think it's not just the Hurricanes and hockey that we deal with this. I mean, God, baseball. How many times do we talk about staring down home runs, or like the stuff in the dugout, or the handshakes, and
Dave Batista's bat throw?
Well, you know, Mike, I was just going to point out that they did the Hurricanes did a reenactment of the bat throw. It was one of their surge celebrations.
That's our fucking That's our fucking culturally appropriating assholes. That's our fucking thing.
Anyway, fellas,
go back to your overrated barbecue, you assholes.
I hate to break up a good party, but I got to start wrapping it up here. So if we got nothing else,
nothing else that's jumping out at me. No big uniform thing. I mean, little things, but
there is one thing I guess you could call a Mike's tab.
All right, make it quick.
It's going to be really quick, all right? Because okay, so we have this thing.
Sorry, time's up. See you later. No, go ahead. Sorry.
So we do this thing every now and then where, Zach, I believe you've a couple times you've brought up the most searched Pornhub terms by state.
Oh God.
Yes.
So one for Canada came out per province.
Boy.
Now.
Please, I need to know what Saskatchewan's is. It's got to be something pretty homey and like wholesome.
It's cartoon.
Really? Yeah. Okay.
But that's actually not what I brought this up. What I bring this up for, because the funniest thing about this was what the top rated search for Quebec was.
Oh boy.
It's just Quebec.
Wait, what?
People in Quebec go to Pornhub, and the top-rated search for the province is Quebec.
I will not watch this unless they're speaking my particular dialect.
Here, I'll share
I do not want Paris. I do not want Toronto. I do not want Brazilian. I do not want Latino. I want Quebec.
There you go. There's the map.
Oh my God! What's with is that Ontario with the Indian thing?
Yeah, Ontario's Indian.
Oh God, I love it. Eskimo. That's fucking hilarious.
Eskimo for none of that.
Tickling. But you know what's? But look, most of these make sense. Okay, like Indian, Toronto. You have a huge Indian population in Toronto, right?
Well, see, I'm thinking like Native American. I'm thinking with a feather, not a dot. But I guess that makes better sense.
That's Manitoba's got you covered with natives. Yeah.
And then Asian in Vancouver. There's a lot of Chinese, Japanese, Korean in British Columbia.
Right.
Makes sense. I mean, Eskimo. I guess it's just people looking for their people.
Who the fuck? Wait a minute. Who's doing smoking here?
I don't know. I don't know what the hell's going on with New Brunswick, where they're just searching.
Wait, that's not Trailer Park Boys. Isn't New Brunswick? They're in what?
They're in Nova Scotia.
Nova Scotia, right? I was going to say.
City, by the way, according to this map,
it's
Nova
what?
Scotia, it's face sitting.
Yeah, that's all like Ricky and Julian from Trailer Park Boys.
Yeah.
This is great.
But the thing that really cracked me up about this was Quebec just being Quebec. like I was showing this to a friend of mine back home, and he just goes, "Man, Quebec's always just gonna be Quebec, isn't it?"
Wow, what a great place. Wow.
Like I couldn't imagine. Like I'm trying to think of like a good example. I guess the best example would be like if somebody in Dallas is like, "Oh, I need a very specific porn," and just looks up Texas.
Like, both of them better be wearing cowboy hats, and that's what this is.
They must both be wearing furs and smoking.
I will only watch the Quebec porn. Everything else is English Canadian propaganda.
Right.
If they're
exactly.
not in a smoked meat shop, I do not want anything of it.
Pretty much.
All right. And on that note, folks, this is what you waited 2 weeks for, people. Just saying. We did end on a traditional note, though. We haven't done an ending like that in a while, so that's pretty cool.
I mean, like, God, as much as I hate the bullshit that Quebec goes through, with the rest of Canada, like, it's things like this that make me go, like, never change. Like,
yeah,
just...
This is beautiful. So, anyway, we're going to wrap it up. I guess that'll do it. So, remember to, I don't know how to follow this.
Remember to...
Go Apollos.
Go Apollos, of course, absolutely. Follow us on Twitter at Basically Sports.
Search Quebec.
Search Quebec, by all means.
Pub, search Quebec, get in touch with,
Actually, search that smoking thing, too, and let us know what you think about that.
You know what? Search Saskatchewan, people. Come on.
But anyway, follow us on Twitter at Basically Sports. Subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, and the YouTubes. And we'll see you next week with another show. Until then, thanks for listening.
Later, guys.
Adios.